There can be only one podcast, and may it be the Prince of the Universe. Hi, folks. I'm Matt.
And I'm Wes.
Hey.
What a different podcast we're going to look into today.
It's going to be a lot different than our usual.
Than the last two, for sure.
Oh, than the last two, for sure. Well, it won't be as much laughter, I'm sure.
A somber evening.
A somber evening compared to what we've had here.
No Silent Night.
No Silent Night being sung here. We're going to talk about, I don't know what to title this, but sequels we wish we had or second chances or whatnot. We talked a little about this during Deadpool, Wesley Snipes coming back as Blade.
Yep.
And you'd mentioned you'd like to see him back.
Well, it's just interesting to see those characters and Deadpool being so well received. It made me think, like, is there a place to like a hand off the baton kind of thing for those actors in a larger sense?
Yeah.
And then it makes you think about the movies that we've seen in the past few years that have either been sequels or remakes that have maybe touched all those nostalgia spots that we wanted. Like you talk about how great Top Gun was and someone reprising that role. So it just made us think that this might be something worth delving into.
Yeah, and I'd always wanted to see that myself because, for example, one of the things I have with the Die Hard movies, I love the Die Hard movies. The first three, even the fourth one was fun for me. The fifth one was just atrocious, and I think that's because Bruce Willis's issues that he had. I think that was when we first started seeing him on screen. I don't think he cares. Seems like he just wants to say the line and walk off the set because he's tired. He's done with it. But at the same time, that may have been the onset of the illness he was experiencing.
Right.
And so now he couldn't, and I hate that it ended on a dud. You know, you had this legacy movie series that went pretty well. They were fun, popcorn, action flicks you could enjoy, laugh at, you know. And that's really what we want when we're thinking about watching a movie and having fun. Shoot, how many 80s, 90s movies do we talk about the same thing? You know, just sitting down watching a movie. It's not the best movie in the world, but it's fun to watch.
Well, you know, here's a question to pose to you in talking about, like, is there a way to go out on a high note and really just wrap things up? And, like, even for athletes, they struggle with that, and stars struggle with that. Is it better to be like Nolan Ryan where you just go out and you completely throw your arm out and it's not a retirement tour? It's just like, oh, I can't pitch anymore. Or Bruce Willis saying, hey, I can't act anymore. Or is that a better way of doing it where you're like, man, I left it all out there? Rather than like being very strategic in this like retirement plan. What do you think?
I mean, it's a careful balance that Hollywood hasn't figured out. We've seen them try. A lot of times it's misses. And a lot of times, like I said, when I talk about the sequel ideas I have, I kind of don't want Hollywood to do it because I think they'll still screw it up. Is that kind of weird to say?
No, I think that's a fair thing. Like maybe sometimes things are best left unsaid.
And I mean, sometimes they get it right. I don't know if you're a Star Trek fan that much.
Not a big.
Benjamin is.
Yep.
And he loves Star Trek: The Next Generation. Watches it every night, still to this day. Watches one episode a night. So big Trek fan. I don't do that, but I've enjoyed Trek. And we watched a couple years ago when Picard, the new series, came out. And I said, well, let's watch it. Atrocious, horrible, terrible. Just, you know.
Y'all covered it.
We covered it. They brought back Picard, and it was awful. And then season 2, I didn't even want to watch it, but I made Benjamin watch it just as a joke. I said, come on, we're going to watch this. It had Q in it, so it kind of fooled us, thinking, oh, yeah, he's a good character. And, of course, it got even worse. If you could be worse, they did. And so the third one, I had no desire to see it. And Benjamin said, well, I'm returning the favor. I'm going to make you watch this one. So I was like, all right. So we watched it. Excellent. They had a new writer, someone who obviously cared about the fans and the show. I don't know why they have people say, yeah, I have this new vision of the show. Well, this is going to suck then, right? I don't know why, but this guy, whoever wrote season 3, was not only did he watch the old seasons, but he was a fan of it. And you need that. You need that fan who cares about the project, who cares about the characters. and gets them right. In fact, if anyone were to say, should I watch Picard? I'd say, yeah, just skip to season 3. You really didn't miss anything in the first 2 seasons, and plus, you don't want to watch the first 2 seasons. They're terrible. And thankfully you don't have to, because it's its own like little storyline. But I want something like that, a nice little send-off. You know, I hope Patrick Stewart's done with Picard now, because ending it on season 3 was a good idea. That's a good send-off for the character. Don't change it. In fact, have them, you know, destroy seasons 1 and 2 and just call it Picard. Don't call it season 3, just call it Picard and just leave it at that. That should be the legacy. And everyone wants their perfect. You hear William Shatner he wants to come back, give Kirk a better ending, even though he died in Generations. Kirk thinks he could do better. Everyone wants to, you know, and rightfully so.
Is this the George Lucas disease of let me go back and rework my painting?
In a way. But certain people who say, hey, I have this character I'm known for, I'd go back if it was something good. And you hear this said a lot, but sometimes they go back just for money. I thought Dumb and Dumber 2 was such a letdown. And do you remember this movie when it came out? I got excited. I was like, oh, wow. And, you know, they wouldn't have waited 20 years unless they had a good idea. And that's what they tell you. And I'm thinking, oh, wow, this is going to be great. They waited.
Yeah, somebody got a divorce.
Yeah.
That was the good idea.
That was the good idea, and a good idea to get some money in the bank now. And it was horrible. It was horrible. It was paled in comparison to the original, and it was so sad. And it's like, ooh, that wasn't good at all. And these remakes that get made 20 years after the fact, you know, it's like, man, you should have come out way earlier, or y'all should have really thought about it before you came out with another one. You know, certain legacies that destroy movies. So my idea of them fixing, how would they fix Die Hard since Bruce Willis is practically retired? Well, you'd bring Bruce Willis back, but only as a side character in a way. Say he's dying and he's sitting there.
A hint of truth on this.
Yes. He's sitting there with Holly. They've gotten back together a little bit. Well, she's with him in the hospital. And they're recounting the old days. He's, you know, about the time they first met. And it's kind of a prequel. So you flash back to when John McClane met Holly and the little bit of an adventure that went with it.
Okay.
Right? Maybe tie it to the future where maybe that guy comes in, but instead of John McClane getting the kill, Holly is going to fire the weapon. You got to have some kind of switcheroo like that. And then John McClane passes into the night. Or maybe he goes out with one more yippee-ki-yay. You know, either way, though, kind of give the characters a nice send-off, you know, or, you know, tying it back to he and his wife getting back together, since that was the whole point of the first and second movie and third movie. You know, they kind of dropped it after the fourth one because they figured, we're never gonna tie ourselves to this pony here. But I think that'd be a nice send-off.
Do you feel like what you're describing is anything like the end of the last Indiana Jones?
Man, oh man.
Because I know how strong you feel about the last Indy.
It was so terrible. Did you see it?
Yes.
It was so terrible, right?
Well, it was weird watching it because it felt like you were really watching it was so much CGI and AI feeling that you felt like
fake.
Yeah, this feels like almost like a fan-made
I don't
project.
mind. Now, we love Indy in the 30s, right? Indy in the late 20s, 30s, like he was in the young Indiana Jones. I don't mind Indy in the 50s, which is what Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was. I didn't mind that. There's a few things in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull I actually enjoyed. Mm-hmm. Not much, but there's a few things. And that's thanks to Steven Spielberg, who directed it. But this next one had nothing to do with Indiana Jones, in my opinion. It was just a CGI fest that was just horrible, because CGI somehow has gotten worse over time. I mean, Jurassic Park still holds up excellent. Excellent. The CGI dinosaurs still look great. So I don't know how we went from a movie from, 1993 that looks better than what we have now. I don't know how that's possible, but it is.
Maybe we're asking too much of it.
You got to use it. I think Spielberg said you got to use it sparingly.
Yeah.
When you need, and I agree with that. Too much of it, and things start to look
tell
cartoony.
the story, not the CGI tell the story.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Let the story tell the story, not the special effects.
Okay.
Special effects are the flavor that goes into the story, makes the story more
I just
appealing.
wondered what you're describing with Die Hard almost sounds loosely like what Disney tried with Indy.
Well, Die Hard would be different because it wouldn't. John and Holly would be the narrators in a way of their first life, and the story would mainly focus in the. Let me see if this one took out in the 50s, 80s, it'd be in the 70s.
But you would need you would need new young actors.
You would need a recast
no
actor as a
kind
young
of CGI.
No.
wonky.
You need younger actors playing their roles in this late 70s and have an adventure.
Okay.
There that ties in together. And it wouldn't be as over the top dramatic Die Hard. There'd be gunfights. There'd be something he had
Well, if
to
it's a
save Holly
70s
from
movie,
something.
if you dial it back, you can kind of play with the.
But just when John met Holly and something like that, just to kind of tie it up and give it a goodbye, give it a good farewell.
Okay.
The other thing I thought about was we saw Neverending Story in theaters, and I'm such a big fan of that movie. Love that movie as a kid. Still a great movie. When we got home, I showed my girls 2. It was awful. It was awful. Worse than I remembered. And then we watched 3. 3 has a young Jack Black as the villain. Jack Black, he goes all in, baby. And that is the absolute worst movie I've ever seen. It's just so terrible. And it just gets worse and worse. So now...
So shout out to 2 sequels right there.
Yeah. Now, after I told the story on a recent podcast, I believe it's Saturday Morning Sam Flange, someone in the comments said, "Hey, Matt, have you seen Tales of the Neverending Story, a TV show that came out in 2001 on HBO?" No, I had not. But yes, I am now watching it. And it's even more sadder. I mean, well, not as sad as Neverending Story 3, but it's pretty...
More sadder would be a good title for the podcast.
More sadder. It's pretty low. And there's very few things that get that low in life than Neverending Story 3. But it was... That was even sadder there that I showed you. But anyway, Tales of the Neverending Story is basically just
such a good gag laugh right there.
I'm telling you. Tales of the Neverending Story is just another retelling of the first movie, just done in TV series form.
Okay.
And it has a good idea because he's reading about the adventures of Atreyu and whatnot. Okay, great. But, in it, his mom is still alive, but then later on his mom dies. And you're like, oh, okay. So is this eventually going to turn into the Neverending Story 1? I don't know. So I thought, wow, what a mess. They keep using the same kid and just screwing up the formula the more they go. And then I thought, how would you fix this, right? How would you, maybe everyone would say do a fresh reboot, right? Another Sebastian, another what? No, man. You get a new kid. He goes into I believe have you seen this movie before? Do you remember this movie?
The Neverending Story?
Yeah.
Vaguely.
I think it's Culliander's bookshop is who he goes into. There's an old man there. Well, this kid, let's say, goes into Culliander's bookshop. There's an old man, and he's smoking a pipe just like he was in the first movie. Just like in the first movie, the kid makes off with the Neverending Story, has virtually the same adventure with a little bit more, intrigue and whatnot, fantasy and stuff. Then, but what we see at the end is he returns it, and the man says, "Did you enjoy it?" He said, "Yeah." He says, "Really good." He said, you knew I took it or whatnot. I don't know. They have a story at the end, but we find out that the librarian is actually Sebastian from the first movie. He kept open the bookstore after Mr. Culliander passed away. That's why it's still called. So we all thought that was Culliander. It wasn't. That's Sebastian from the original one. And he says, I had to stop. There comes a time when you have to stop reading the Neverending Story because a book like this requires a children's imagination. And he said, and I would think that, he said, every time I read it, though, my imagination got less creative. Hence, every sequel and rebirth of Sebastian is worse over time.
Okay.
So what that is a reiteration of Sebastian reading his same life story over and because in the Neverending Story, Sebastian is a character. It's like, what? I'm in this book? And so that would kind of explain all the rehashed storylines over and over and over again and how the story kind of degraded as the sequels went on. It's just Sebastian growing up, reading the book again. It's just not as good as the first time. I mentioned this off the podcast. And by the way, folks, we do a pre-chat. We try not to give away gold, but we found out last week we gave away gold and didn't record it. sometimes we're wise enough to stop ourselves from talking and do it live on the podcast, but we were not this past time.
The toothpaste got out of the tube too fast.
It did, and we didn't realize it. So, but one of the things I know that we talked about when we were talking about all sorts of fun things, and now I've lost my train of thought now.
Well, that's okay. We were talking about Never-Ending Story before this.
We were talking about Never-Ending Story before this, and we were talking about how every time when you grow up, your imagination gets less and less creative. Oh, there it was. I told you about, there was a, this wasn't last week, but it was a while back. I bought a book for my kids that I read for Halloween. I remember I was reading it one year. Okay, the Imp, the Scalawag, and the Goblin.
Yes.
And they tell stories about the scary kid who came to get them. You know, it's the inverse of a kid telling stories about the scary monsters.
Yep.
And I loved that book as a kid. Read it every time I could rent it out, check it out. I loved it, especially around Halloween. It's the best story in the world. Is it? No, that story is weird, man. I don't understand most of the Goblin, Scalawag, and Imp's dreams or whatever they're doing. And the story is it's a very heavy book for a children's book. There's a lot of words in there. Like, I get tired of reading it to my girls. But I'm glad I have it. Nostalgia there. Is it the best thing ever? Or, books we loved as a kid.
Okay, well, why do you think it's changed so much? If you loved it
I've changed.
Okay.
I've changed. I'm like, this is silly. Why is a goblin? Goblin is rolling melons. He's standing on top of a bunch of melons and rolling them, walking backwards and rolling them up and down hills to his place. Why? Why is Goblin like, now you think too much into the story enough to enjoy it. You're asking why. Well, this doesn't make sense. Why does that just suddenly appear? Well, that's convenient. Why does the Imp want to throw everything out of the house? He has fun throwing stuff out of the house, so he keeps throwing more and more stuff out of the house. Why? What's the point? That's the thing.
You sound like a very Gen X kid now. Like,
well, no.
We asked why when we were 16.
Well, yeah, but it's the same reason why people 10 years older than me hate Ewoks. Yeah, I love Ewoks because they came out when I was a kid. I love them. Someone who was 10 years older was 16 saying, what is this crap? I love Empire. What is this crap?
Right.
Because they're a lot older now.
Yep.
Okay. And I get that. 'Cause some people love Episode 1. They love it. They love Jar Jar. I hate him. But you know what? I wasn't a kid back then. If I was a kid back then, we probably would have loved those movies, right? Young Anakin. Wow, he's already, woo, we can be Jedi too. We can be starfighter pilots. Oh, look at her. We'd probably love those movies a lot more if we were younger, right? Certain things like that. So just as we mature, the creative mindset kind of tones down. We can't pretend anymore. It's hard for us to play G.I. Joe now. Although, well, now I got to go 40 years ago. We could have played some mean G.I. Joe right together. We would have had adventures everywhere.
Yo Joe.
Yo Joe, or whatever. Thundercat. You name the toy. Yeah. You had an imagination. Now, I remember when I was older and watching my little brothers play X-Men. They were playing with X-Men toys. And I was like, they're like, hey, Beast, hey, Cyclops, do you see any bad guys today? Nope, but we got to look for them. What kind of conversation is that? That's a conversation the kids would have. And they're going to have an adventure, but I'm like, no, you need to plan this out. What are you talking about? No, Sinister wouldn't talk like that. What are you doing? What are you doing to Mr. Sinister? No, he's not. That guy is a thug. Sinister is the main villain. Don't make him obey. Don't make Sinister obey whatever his name was.
So they didn't have the creative side.
Well, they just imagination. And so I figured that's what the Never-Ending Story was, based off imagination of Sebastian. And as he got older, he was losing that that imagination. So the stories were being less creative, which explains why the sequels and remakes got worse and worse.
Okay.
You could just say all we saw was Bastion rereading the same story, and so this one kind of reinvigorates the franchise, explains the sequels. I'm not for skipping over the sequels. Like, oh, they those don't count. We're redoing it like James Cameron. This one takes place after you've seen 3 movies.
Yeah, you've changed
or 4 movies.
Too many
now,
timelines.
Yeah, now we're gonna say only 1 and 2 have happened. So now here's my number 3. No, it doesn't work like that because fans were invested for the whole. So just like Cobra Kai, they embraced even the bad.
Right.
Karate Kid 3 is not a good movie by any stretch of them. I mean, it's laughable good. You laugh when you see it. We Benjamin and I howled when we saw it because it's so ridiculous. But the series says, you know what? Nope, we're not going to excuse it. We're not going to ignore it. Just the first movie takes place in our universe. That was the best one. No, explain them all. Put it all in there and explain it all away. Let people know you didn't waste your time watching it. You know, I don't know. I feel that's a nice thing for the fans. So those are just some things I was thinking about, especially when I'm watching Tales of the Never-Ending Story, which, like I said, is a good idea. It's a good idea. But in a TV show based in 2001, you can tell, you know, not as much
2001 vibes.
2001 vibes. You could make a better show, but because it was for kids, they were just going for bare minimum, you know.
No budget.
Nostalgia, very little budget, you know. Man, you know, it looks a little, not that this is a bad thing, but you remember Hercules and Xena Warrior Princess stuff? Mm-hmm. It's on that level, but a drop, you know, one step lower because it's for kids. You know, what if we made a cheaper kids version of that kind of, you could see the sets, the props. Oh, they're tribesmen. Wow, everyone is clean in this show. Everyone took baths, obviously, because their skin's perfect, their hair's perfect, you know. There's a little glaring thing. We usually pass that over because we know it's just a TV show, but at the same time, I started thinking about those. Now, you talk about actors, you know, seeking a second shot. I wanted to ask you about second chances because just recently, Kevin Spacey came on Piers Morgan, talking about, you know, he wasn't convicted. He was found not guilty on all of his little charges, but yet, of course, completely unhireable in Hollywood.
Right.
Does someone like Kevin Spacey deserve a second chance?
I think everybody deserves a second chance. I think that's a new thing that I think in the past 10 years where we judge so harshly, where there is no, like, we don't give things time to see the bigger picture. It's just
that's true.
We get right. We want to read that. We want to read the bulletin of who's guilty, what they did wrong, and move on. And there's never like the depth of things that we used to have. And I think that long way about saying that is I think he definitely deserves a second chance, but I think everyone has to rebuild their career.
Yeah.
And that's in any facet of life. If you change the job that you're in your 40s, you're going to have to pay dues that you probably haven't paid in quite some time. And I think that's a detriment to a lot of us. We get older and we feel like we can't do that anymore, either physically, financially, mentally. But if you've got like these actors that definitely have the chops to do something, they're willing to do that. And I think Hollywood is such a changing model that you definitely can do that.
You know, I think about this a lot of times when I used to go to Comic Cons a lot, because you're thinking, wow, I really like that person. Is, you know, not just, I'm happy that they're at the con, but that also means they ain't got no work.
Yes.
You know, coming in. And then you meet some of these people and they're super nice too. And I'm thinking, man, super nice. Kind of wish they got another gig, got another, you know, new life, doing something else. They were famous playing this one character years ago. They're very gracious to give their time to talk about. I don't know if did you ever see Val Kilmer's autobiography?
No, but I heard about it.
It's excellent. He said he used to feel kind of pity for actors who went to conventions. I mean, he thought that kind of meant your career's over.
Yeah.
And you're just a sad little man trying to make money where you can. Run. But he went, you know, when his schedule was free, he's like, well, may as well go to these. I can make a lot of money.
Yeah.
But found out, like, what was I thinking? He said, these are people that have appreciated my work for years. I am meeting fans who were telling me that, hey, I loved you in this movie, movies that, you know, he did a long time ago that no one he thought would remember. And they're telling about how much they remember that movie and loved it.
Right.
And like he said, I could kick myself because I learned that, wow, this isn't sad. I shouldn't pity these actors. I should pity actors who don't come and talk to these people who are just so big fans. You realize, wow, my work means a lot. I'm not, and you are just this character. His top characters get loved a lot, but he said there were so many times people would shock me about saying, I loved you in this movie. And he's like, whoa, the straight to video, I love that movie too, but I thought I was the only one.
Right.
You know, so you get it's almost like getting to hear your cheerleaders. And he's talking about how much the fans meant to him. And I thought that was a good thing, a good way to put it. Because, yeah, the fans do say a lot of nice things, and you get to hear, get a lot of feedback from them. And, you know, some people take that better than others.
Well,
but
we know from enough Comic Cons, and I'm sure everyone that listens to this podcast has been to at least one. It's a different breed of fan. You are dealing with the 1 percentile.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, they are going to really give you a lot of attention, maybe too much.
Maybe a little too much. Maybe make you dress up or something.
Yeah, you know, you've watched their work over 100 times.
And you told them that.
Yeah, and you can recite that. That can be, you know.
Some people, I've seen this happen. I've seen people get like really giddy and act like, you know, totally different from their character. They just start laughing. CJ, who used to be part of Saturday Morning Sam Flange, he got to meet the voice of Batman, Kevin Conroy.
Okay.
Back before he passed away. And Kevin Conroy, nicest guy in the world. I'd heard several things about him, and I believe they're all true because he took time with every person, talked to every single person. And when it got to CJ, he was just babbling and gushing and laughing and just goofing. I was like, what is he doing? My wife even said, what's wrong with him? I said, he is meeting his idol.
Right.
He's meeting his idol, and he just kind of fell apart and just kind of fanboying out. And you can't help that. I met one of my favorite board game designers one time, and I've been to several cons. I've been to several cons, talked to several people. Been excited to meet people, but never been starstruck. Always knew what to say, smiled, laughed, thanked them for their time, moved on. You know, it's just another day. They're here to do one thing. We're doing a transaction. It ain't something they found them on the street. I'm paying them, but at the same time, I'm fine.
Sure.
But with him, it was somewhat different. I was just so excited to meet him. And he actually, that was his last appearance, his last con. He passed away not long after that. But I told his wife, his widow, this about the story. I said, you don't remember this, but back during Dragon Con, my wife would make fun of me because when we go by, I'd go, hey, oh, man, oh, well, I love your game. We play your game every weekend, except for this weekend because I'm here, but we're going to play it next weekend. You know, I'm just a total doofus. And then I have every game, except for this game, but I'm going to buy this game now. Yeah, because I don't have it. Yeah, it just came out, stupid. And then my wife, when we walked away, she went, I thought you were going to get him autograph your game. I went, oh no, okay. So we went back and said, hey, would it be all right? I mean, if you're busy, it's okay. It's just kind of it's so stupid. I'm just tripping over words. Went, would you maybe sign my? And he has a signature on his my board game, and he signed it and everything. Sure. I was like, great. Oh, thanks. Oh, that's awesome. You know, I'm just fanboying out of it. Walk away. Then Meg goes, I thought you said you wanted a picture of him too. I said, we're gonna have to come back tomorrow. I can't do it anymore. I've made myself look stupid twice. So you all have that moment there. But some of those people, I think, man, I really wish, I cheer for this person to find a second life on a second character, you know, they can really ride out, you know, and be memorized for, or get to reprise that role if possible, giving that character a send-off.
Yeah, I think that anybody, when we get to our age, I think part of that plays a role is that's what we're looking for. So we inherently push that on to the people. You know, everybody wants to be seen and be like, wow, you have not fallen apart, or you know, whatever. So I think when the people that we grew up with, regardless if it was Mark Summers on Double Dare or something, we're always rooting for, well, hey, I'm glad they're still working or something like that. Or suppose you go like, whatever happened to them?
Yeah.
You know, what happened to J.D. Roth after he quit doing Funhouse?
What happened to J.D. Roth? Did some TV movies too back in the day. But I don't know. But maybe they're doing something. Yeah. I think about that. And then the other thing, IMDb sometimes doesn't keep up with the actor, don't have a profile, don't know where they are. There's nothing about them on YouTube.
Yep.
And I'm like, well, where did they go? What happened to them?
They just settled into society.
Yeah, they did. And they're fine just in whatever outlet they're in there. And that's kind of wild. I mean, you got to do what you got to do. Some of these people move. I'm like Mark Summers. He's big behind the scenes at Food Network.
Right.
But I didn't know that. I knew he was doing some shows, but he even stopped that because he was happy behind the camera. And I was like, I'm glad he's happy, but I want to see him bring back Double Dare. I know he doesn't care about that, but you know, he suffers from OCD.
I'm sure he does. In that field for that long.
Well, you're in Double Dare where they're getting slimed. What are you thinking? What are you going to be doing with all the nasty?
You got to get some details in there to avoid it turning into a
I'm telling you what, I bet he
Scrambled
has an
eggs.
autobiography, and I think I want to read it if he does, now that I think about it, because that would be an interesting life. I'd love to hear about his life. Anyway, all right, we'll stop there. Just us
Do you
rambling
think
about.
Brandon would play Parent Double Dare with his mom and his dad?
They'd probably had to be on opposite teams.
Opposite sides of
Opposite
the
sides.
cafeteria.
It'd be well in Double Dare. It's, yeah, dad and Brandon versus his mom and I don't know the cat, which obviously love them more than love Brandon.
Mystery partner.
Mystery partner. All right. So that's it. Tell us what you thought about Double Dare, and then any actors.
Who needs a second chance?
Yeah. Who needs a second
including
chance?
this podcast?
Yeah.
After the last two.
Exactly. And we'll see you next time on Princes of the Universe.